Lesson 4, Line Plots and Histograms. What we will learn today is how to construct a line plot and how to construct a histogram. Our vocabulary today is line plot and histogram. So first of all, let me just show you what a line plot is. So right here is a line plot. It is a way to show our data. So if we look, we have our number line, and it goes 3, 4, 5, and 6. And above 3, you see that there's 2 X's. So that means that there's going to be 2 3s in our data. And then there's no X's above our 4, so there would be no 4s. And then there would be 1 5 because there's 1 X above our 5. And then there would be 3 6s because it shows that there's 3 X's above our 6. So that's just one way to show our data. Another way is called a histogram. And a histogram is like kind of like a bar graph, but instead of having categorical data like our favorite color, we're going to be displaying numerical data. And below you can see a picture. See how it kind of looks like a bar graph? But instead of the categories being colors down here, it is numbers. So from 0 to 2, 3 to 5, 6 to 8, 9 to 11, 12 to 14. Each one of those categories has to be the same size, and they can't repeat. See how I go from 0 to 2 and then right from 3 to 5? None of those repeat because the numbers have to go into one of the categories. And then on here is our frequency, or how many times that number occurs within the categories. So let's get some practice on making these. So first we're going to talk about how to make a line plot. So this one says Jasmine asked her class how many pets they had. The results are shown in the table. Make a line plot of the data. Then describe the data presented in that graph. So our first step is going to make a number line. So we're going to just make our line, put our arrows on the end, and then we're going to look at our data. And I see that my lowest number is 0 and my highest number is 4. And I have to include all of the numbers in between there. So I'm going to go from 0 to 4 on my number line. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Then my next step is I'm going to be looking at the data, and I'm going to put X's above each of the numbers. So I first see a 3, so I'm going to put 1 X above there, and then I'm going to cross it off, and then a 2, and another 2. So now I want you to pause the podcast and continue to make the line plot by just putting the X's above the numbers on our number line until we finished all of our data, and then you can check your work. Alright, I have finished my line plot. So if yours looks like this, you're in a great place. So the easiest part about this is just making sure that you have all of your numbers represented in the line plot. And how to describe it is one way is we can just look and see, well, which one has the most X's, and that would be 2 because that one has the most X's, and that tells us that most of the students in Jasmine's class have 2 pets. Now we're going to make a histogram. So the first step for making a histogram is also to determine the lowest number we have, and that is 65. And then I want to locate my highest number, and that is 98. So like for a bar graph, we would come up with categories for our bottom, but that is for categorical data. Now we have test scores, which are numerical data or numbers. So we have to come up with our categories that we will put these numbers in, and we typically have about 5 to 9 different categories that are the same size. So I'm going to go by 5s for my categories, and I'm going to start with 65. And then I'm going to go to 69 because the next category cannot include the last category. So I can start right at 70 and go to 74. And then I'm going to continue my categories until I get to 99. And I want to have all of my categories be the same size. Now that I have my categories, I can tally in each categories the numbers that come up on my data. So my first one is 72, so that is going to fall between my 70 and 74. And my next one is 97, so that's going to fall within this category down here. And now I want you to pause the podcast and continue making the tallies in each one of these sections and then check your work. Alright, here is the completed tally chart. Now I can start making my histogram. My first step is to make that X and Y axes. And then I'm going to put on the bottom my categories. So I want you to pause the podcast and do that on your own right now. Now I have my categories on the bottom. And on the side, I'm going to write my frequency, or how many times each one of these occurs. So I can just go up by ones on here. So I can go 1 all the way up to, I see the most is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I'm going to go up 1 to 7. So do that on your graph right now. And then I'm going to look at my first category, 65 to 69. There was 2 tallies there, so I'm going to make my bar up to 2. And then my next category is 70 to 74, and that was also 2, so I'm going to make that bar up there. And then 3 for the 75 to 79. And 5 for the 80 to 84. And I want you to pause the podcast and continue making the bars for the remaining sections. Excellent. So this is what your histogram should look like. And then I have to put a title. And my top title is going to be test scores. And then on the side, I'm going to label that frequency. And the bottom, I'm going to label that scores. Alright, let's try another example where we're making a line plot and a histogram of this data. So I want you to pause the podcast and make those 2 graphs on your own. First, I'm going to make the line plot, and then you can check your work from that. And then I'll make the histogram separately. Alright, let's check our work on the line plot. So this one has decimals in it, but it doesn't matter because you still can make the number line. Just have to include those decimals. Alright, so here is my number line, and I included the whole numbers, and then in the middle are the decimal places, which would be 0.5. Now I'm going to make my X's so you can check your work. Alright, so here is the completed line plot. If yours looks like this, you are in great shape. So now I'm going to make my histogram, and remember that my first step is to make those categories. Those categories have to be the same size, and they cannot repeat numbers from the last one. So remember that you have to include those decimals in some way. So just make it like a normal category, but just have to include those decimals. So I'm going to do that. So here are my categories, and now I have to make those tally marks. Excellent, I have those tally marks, so make sure that you have the same tally marks as me, or if you made your categories different, then that's fine, but just make sure that you included all of the numbers in the chart. Next, I'm going to make those X and Y axes and plot my categories on the bottom and my frequency on the side and make my histogram. Then you can check your work after that. Now I have that, and I'm going to make my bars for each of my categories, and then don't forget to add those titles. Alright, so once you are finished, your histogram should look something like mine right here. So if it does, and you don't have any questions, then you're feeling good. Otherwise, if you didn't understand anything, this would be a great time to go back and watch some of those parts that you didn't understand, and you can answer your questions in class tomorrow. Otherwise, have a good night.